have the course SC300, the Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator, today together. As you know, we are going to have a course for 5 days. So during these 5 days, we are going to have each day like 5 hours, and we are going to talk about different topics about this course. But before starting to talk about the course and what we're going to learn, first let me introduce myself to you. So, as I said, my name is Armin Brandel, and I have more than 3 years experience as a Microsoft certified trainer. I have different certifications from Azure Administrator to Azure Security Engineer and the Network Engineer. I have some experiences before the cloud. I have experiences with Microsoft, Cisco, and Mikrotik router and switches, Windows Server, networking, and NOC support. So that's what I can tell you about myself. During this course, actually, we are going to, as I said, we are going to have at the beginning in this session, we are going to have 2 hours. So we are going to check some slides from Microsoft, and I will show you some of the stuff also in my portal, so you can see how to do the things, and you would see the portal also to check some configurations. And also after that, you would have like half an hour break time, and after you would have like 2 hours and a half to do the rest of your labs or do some homeworks. The point is, this course we would have some different topics, and the topics are too many, so we are not going, we won't be able to cover all the topics within this course because we will have only 2 hours per day. So, but we are going to cover actually most of the topics. I'm going to show it to you, and we are going to go through the slides. But anyway, you would have also some homeworks and some labs to do during your time after the lecture, or after the whole 5 hours, some homeworks to do later to understand the topics much better. There are some prerequisites for this course. It's better to have some information and be familiar with SC900, the basics of the Azure security, and also to have some information about the cloud. Well, we will go through all things like from scratch to, for those who don't have too much experience. But anyway, if you would have some experiences from before, it would help you so much to understand the things much better during this course. I know that most of you would have the exam after this week, so it's important to know also which sections, which modules have which percentage in the exam. We have 4 modules within Azure SC300. The first one is implement an identity and management solution. You would have around 25 to 30% in the exam from that. So this is actually what we are going to check today. It would be about the users and groups and some roles maybe, and how to assign roles to the users, and some basics about the user and access, about the security of Azure. The second module would be implement an authentication and access management solution. It will also have 25 to 30%, almost the same, all of them except the third one, which is implement access management for apps. You would have like between 10 to 15% in your exam. And plan and implement an identity governance strategy. You would have 25 to 30% within your exam. So as I said, we are going to have 5 days. So the first day, we're going to check the first module, and the second day, the second, and we will go like that. The last day, we would have time to go through what we have learned in these 4 days. So we are going to have something like exam preparation, and the last day, so you would get more familiar with some similar questions, and also you would have some um, recall, some review about what we have learned during these 4 days. There are, as I said, it's better to take the SC900 exam. It's about the basics, the fundamentals of the Microsoft security compliance and identity fundamentals. So with that, you would have more information about the security and how are the security and compliance and identity in general within Azure. Then we have the SC300 course, which we are going to have today. So with that exam, you would be like an associate, and you would have the certification as an associate, and you can be like an security administrator. And after that, there are different options. You may want to have the certification for Azure Solutions Architect expert, or you would may have like SC100. That would be also the security architect. These are the two expert level certifications that you could earn after knowing these uh, courses about SC300 and SC900. During the Cloud Week, you will have some access to some resources and some labs. So the live sessions that cover the full curriculum of tracks, supplement with self-paced learning from MS Learn, Microsoft Learn. So you can also check in Microsoft Learn. The labs, the most tracks include labs done during the sessions and homework labs that you should complete on your own. So as I said, after the lecture, we are going to have 2 hours. After that, you would have like half an hour break, and you can do your labs, and also you would have some homework if you have more time during the lab time, you can do also your homework. If not, you can do it actually later on to have better experience about learning about SC300. We have the live sessions are recorded, so you would have the access to the on-demand access to the sessions, to the recorded sessions, around 5 to 10 days after the Cloud Week concludes. So if you have any question, if you want to have access to these videos, you would have after 5 to 10 days. You wouldn't have directly access to the PowerPoint slides, but anyway, if you have any question, you can review the videos about what we have talked, and you may have your answer with those videos. And as I said, we have the labs. These you can find. I'm pretty sure that you have some instructions how to do your labs. But anyway, if you have any question, my colleague David would be your moderator today, and he can answer all your questions within quick Q&A section. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask in Q&A. So David, my colleague, would answer you, and with the best information that could help you. For those who have already the certification, or they want to renew, or if you have any question about how would be the renewal, actually after you get the certification, most of the certifications of Azure are now like they have only 1 year expiration. So after 1 year, they're expired. So you need to do the exam one more time, but it wouldn't be the same way like proctored and like it was the first time. It would be much easier, but anyway, you need to renew all your certifications within the normally 1 year after you earn the certificate. So that was pretty much what we had to know before starting the course. Um, Before starting anything, let me show you some stuff. Maybe it would help you. So you can just go to Microsoft Learn. You can just check SC300 learning path. So the first link that you get is about the learning paths of SC300. Here you can find different information. One of the most important information that you need to know that the exam will be updated on October 31st. So in like 2 weeks it would be updated. There would be some changes, maybe around 20%. There would be changes in the information that you need to learn and you need to know. So be careful about that. If you're going to take the exam after that time, please take a look again at the guide that you have here, because here in the learning pass, as you can see, we have the 4 modules and we can check those 4 modules, and you would have information. Each module would have different units, and that would help you so much actually. And if you, as I said, if you're going to take the exam after a while, it will be updated. So please take a look at here, and it may have different percentage for each section of the exam. As we said, we had these percentages. There are almost 25 to 30%, all of them, except the third module that is around 15 to 20%. So it may change. And also, you need to check the study guide. Let's take a look at study guide here. So in the study guide, it will be shown which modules and which topics you need to know. So here, for example, about the identities, you need to know how to configure and manage the Azure AD tenants and all these stuff. So in case you're going to take the exam after a while, please take a look at here so you would get familiar with the new terms, and in general, how would be the exam, how are the questions, and how many points you need. You need, for example, 700 points to pass this exam successfully. And here is actually would be your guide if you would need it anytime. So knowing that, let's go back to our presentation. Give me a moment. So we are going to start our course with the first module, Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator. Actually, before starting that, let's take a look what is actually identity and access. So this course would be about identity and access management. So we are going to have we have 2 circles here. Well, here would be our identity, and here would be our access. This identity and access would have some similar part that they would be connected with each other. What does it mean, an identity? Identity means, for example, like some types, like we have the normal user, we have the Microsoft 365 user, or we have the local Active Directory users. So these are the information that would be the identity. And access, what does it mean to have access? These are the permissions and some roles which are important within the Active Directory. So with these permissions and these roles, you can give access to those users or your Microsoft 365 user or whatever you have, or some apps, to have access to the resources. So that is actually IAM here, Identity and Access Management. So the whole thing that we're going to do during this course would be that to know the connectivity between identity and access, and to know which users, which type of users we are going to deal with. And each type of those users, which permissions do they really need. So that is what we are going to configure during this course. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. So in this module, we are going to talk about how to create, configure, and manage identities, configure and manage Azure Active Directory, implement and manage external identities, and implement and manage hybrid identity. Um, to create the users, a user is actually the object that you're going to define within Azure, and that user could have access to different with the roles and permissions that you're giving to that user. That user can have access to different resources within your cloud, and those users obviously are similar to the users like the traditional Active Directory, like daemon service Active Directory. They would also, they could be in some different groups. You would have so many more features within Azure Active Directory, something like single sign-on or the conditional access and all those. We're going to talk about all of those later on this course. But anyway, these are the information that you would need to define for the user within your Azure portal. There are some information that are required and some information which are metadata. We are going to check those when we are going to create a user within our Azure portal. So let's go and try to make a user here in my Azure portal. The first thing that we're going to do, we go to Azure Active Directory. You can search in the bar Azure Active Directory or just click on it. So on the left plate, I can see the users. I'm going to click on it. And then here I have the list of my users. So to create a new user, I can just come here and click on create a new user. We have two different options, like create new user in your organization or invite a user. We're going to talk about the guest user later, but for now, we're just going to check how to create a normal user within our tenant. So here we can define the username, I don't know, maybe let's say John Anderson is the name. So it would be J Anderson at the address .microsoft.com. This address, this domain name is actually the default domain name on Microsoft.com, which is assigned to all the Azure tenants. We can change that within a custom domain. We have not talked about the custom domain yet, but later we'll talk. Just keep in mind, we can change that, and here we can choose different domain. And then these informations are required. We have some metadata. We could use those data later for some conditions, but for now we are going to leave those just like that. Auto-generate password, or let me create my password. These are the options that you would have. And here also we can assign that user to a group. We have not talked yet about the groups, but just keep in mind that directly from here, when we are creating the user, we can assign that user to a group. So we won't do that later, but that's an option, or we can just skip it and later to check the user and assign it to a group. And we have also roles. Again, we have not talked about it yet, but the roles that you can define for a user, you can choose it when you are creating the users actually directly from here. There are so many roles that you can just go through and check which role you actually need. Later, you will see that we can also make and create some custom roles to have like our self-defined roles if in case that we need it. And from the settings, we have the some other options and some job info options. These are metadata. We're not going to choose any of those. So we only need to create the user and new user would be created. And here in the notification, as you can see, it's successfully created. That's how the user actually would be created. Now that we're here, let's take a look at some other options. We would have some information within the slides later on, but let's check it here first. As I said, we can make create a new user, or for example, here we have the bulk operations. What are bulk operations? These are for the group of users that we are going to download or upload in a just in a short time. So we can come here and just say bulk create, and we would have a CSV file that we could download with the information and just change the information within that CSV file. Let's take a look at it. First, you need to click download, then it would open the file. So as you can see, these are different columns with and rows with different information. So you can define all your users, the username and all the metadata also here, and then use those data just to upload this file, and you would have all your user at once on Azure Active Directory. That is one option, and it's actually pretty simple and pretty useful, because if you are going to like create hundreds of users, and you for sure you wouldn't like to come here every time and click a new user, and you would have probably some errors in typing, so you don't want that. So it's better to use the bulk operations. Also, another option, for example, imagine that we have the user Alex here deleted. So I'm going to delete the user. Yes. And then I'm going to the left plate, the deleted users. I'm going to check about the users that we have, that how it will show up here. Just some seconds it would take. I'm going to click on refresh. Yes, now it's here. Alex Wilber. We have deleted that users just now. And as you can see here, the deleted time is on October 17th, and the permanent deletion date is in 1 month. So you would have 30 days before that user would be permanently deleted from your Azure Active Directory. In these 30 days, you can choose if you want to restore the user, so the user would be back on your tenant, or to delete permanently before that date. These are the options that you need to know about users within Azure. So let's go back to our presentation. Here. So, yeah. That was about the users, and now we have the groups. As we said, groups are to have different users from, for example, different departments in the same group, so we can manage those users better. Or also for the roles and permissions, instead of giving roles and permissions separately to each users, we can give those to the groups, so we can manage those roles much better with just adding those to some groups. And then when we have a new user, we can add that new user only to that group, so automatically that user would inherit all the permissions and roles of that group. So we have two types of groups in Azure. We have the security groups, that is which is most common, and it's for all the users that we're going to create within Azure Active Directory. And we have Microsoft 365 groups. These are for access for the shared mailbox or some information about Microsoft 365. So in case that we are going to create a new group and it's about our users, and we want to use it in all Active Directory, it's always to choose the security groups. We have also dynamic groups. We can have the users dynamically assigned to different groups. That For that you would need a P1 or P2 membership of your Azure Active Directory. There are different tiers of Azure Active Directory. There are the free one, which is you don't pay, but you have some limitations. You wouldn't have access to all the functions of Azure Active Directory within that license because it's for free. And there are P1 and P2. With P1 and P2, you would have more access to so many other features. These would be, for example, from conditional access to MFA, multi-factor authentication. We have not talked about those yet. We will talk about those, I think, tomorrow in the next module. But anyway, tomorrow I will show it also to you the exact difference between those licenses. But for now, just to know that to access this dynamic membership group, you would need a P1 or P2 access to your Azure Active Directory. So we'll take a look at also dynamic groups within the Azure portal. Let's check it in the portal. So in case we go back to the Azure Active Directory, and here on the left plate under users, I can choose groups. And then we can click on the new group. And here, as we said, we have two types. We have the security and Microsoft 365. We can choose the group name, like technical department. And the group description, it could be the same. It's a metadata anyway. Azure AD roles can be assigned to the group. That's what we talked about it, that if we want to add, if we want to assign Azure Active Directory roles to that group, so all the users would have the same permissions. So in that case, we are going, for example, to choose the owner. Let's say, for example, I would be the owner of that, the administrator, and then we are going to choose the members. Let's say Alan, for example, and then there are some roles. We have not talked exactly about the roles yet, but here we can choose the roles, the different roles that are actually available for us. So, for example, from application administrator, application developer, we have here billing administrator. These are some compliance administrator. These are some common roles that you would want to give to your users. That's one option. But if I click on here and I say that I don't want to assign the Azure Active Directory roles to that group, then I can choose the membership type. And as we said, we can have the option of dynamic user or dynamic device. So let's choose dynamic user, and then we would have a dynamic query. We can add query, and with these queries, we would have different user assigned to that group. For example, let's add an expression. We would have the expression of we want maybe the country of the operator equals maybe Canada. And with that query, with those query that we are going to define, and we can here have more and or. So we could have our users dynamically assigned to that group. That's actually a really cool feature because you don't need to go through all your users in case that you have so many users. You just want to have the users like grouped, but without too much work. without going through all users one by one. You can do it with a dynamic group within your Azure Active Directory. And remember, as I said, you need a P1 or P2 license to do that, and also for the dynamic device. So that's the way actually you are going to create your group and to assign that group a role or a permission, so the users of which are member of that group would have access to that. Yeah, that was about the users and groups. It's pretty simple. It's like the uh, simplest part of that SC300 maybe. Let's go to the configure and manage device identities. We have within Azure actually different types of devices that would be registered within Azure. There are two types. That the first one is Azure Active Directory registered devices. It's about BYOD, bring your own device. It's when, for example, be careful for example, for your exam, in case that you get any question that you bring your own device or you have your personal device, the answer would be the registered one. With the registered devices, you would bring your own device. So that is the definition that for personal equipments, you are going to use that. And it would help you and your organization to control it within the mobile device management and mobile application management, MAM and MADM, MDM. So these are the functions that you would have more control around your devices, even if these devices are not organizational devices. So that's the way that you can do it. Uh, in this case, for example, you just connect yourself to your computer with your local admin and password, and then through a browser or something, you connect yourself to the Azure Active Directory. So you don't log on with the credentials of your Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. You log on with your local information. And that's the way how it works. The second option is about the joint devices. Here we have the organizational devices. That is the second type of devices that we can register within Azure. So in your exam, if you have if you see something about organizational devices, the answer is always joined. In this case, when you want to log on, you don't use your local admin password. You use your Active Directory, Azure Active Directory admin username and password to log on. So that's one of the differences. The other difference is cloud only. It's really important because later we will have the third option and you will see the difference between those. But for now, to know that that option about the joint devices, it's always cloud only. It's not written here, it's not too updated, but also the Windows 11, you can have it within this configuration for your organizational devices. And what really good is you can have the conditional access to the device identity. That could We have not talked about the conditional access yet. It's about tomorrow, but for now, just to know, for that type of connection, when you have joint devices within your cloud, you can have those conditional access. So when the user wants to log on, it would have the information in your Azure Active Directory, and based on the risky users, risky logon, and all these stuff, it can decide if it needs maybe another way of authentication, a multi-factor authentication, or it would block the access of the user. And at the end, we have the third one. We have the hybrid Azure Active Directory join. Why do you need that? In case that you have your on-prem network, as you can see here, if you have your on-prem network and also you have your Azure Active Directory, you may have this configuration for your devices, and this would be actually visible to your devices within your Azure Active Directory. In this case, for example, you can, when you want to have connection between your Azure Active Directory and your on-prem network, you can have a replicable to replicate the hash and the devices. It's you would need Azure AD Connect between those Active Directories. That's the way how it works. So with Azure AD Connect, you are going to connect your Azure Active Directory and your on-prem network so they can talk with each other. And that's the way that they can replicate hash and the devices that each of them are going to know. So, and knowing that, so your device could be connected to your Azure Active Directory and at the same time to the on-prem network. And that's called the hybrid Azure AD joined devices. Let's check the devices also within Azure. I'm not sure if I have any devices registered here, but anyway, on the left plate on your Azure Active Directory, you have also under Manage, you have devices. So when you click on that, and then you click on the All Devices, yeah, it's not shown here because I don't have any devices registered or like joined here, but here you would see, and take a look at here, the join type. Here you would see if it's registered. Registered, as we said, is your personal device. If it's joined, like cloud only or organizational device, or if it's hybrid AD joined, it's when you have your on-prem network. And as we said, for the hybrid join, you would always need Azure AD Connect. We're not going to go through that in this course exactly how to configure that and how it works. But anyway, always to connect your on-prem network to your Azure Active Directory, you would need Azure AD Connect to make that connection between your Azure Active Directory and your on-prem Active Directory. And then also you would have Azure AD Cloud Sync, that is, you can install it on multiple Active Directories, joined on-prem services to have some redundancy and all these options of federation. As I said, we are not going to go through that actually deeply. So let's go back to our presentation and talk about the licenses. It's a really important part of the course because the licenses, well, in the lab situation, maybe they wouldn't be important for you because you are not going to have real users or real groups. But in reality, these are so important because every time that you're going to have a new license, you're going to purchase a new license for your organization, you need to know how many users are going to use those licenses and for what do you need. So you need to have to find actually the best option for the amount of the licenses that you're going to buy. So these we have different types of licenses. These could be, as I said, for example, for P1 or P2 license within Azure Active Directory. These are what you can actually, you have it also, you would have it like 1 month for free. Later on, I will show it to you how it works to connect it. And you would have some additional services from Microsoft 365. For example, you would need some E5, G5, or E3, G3. These are different types of licenses that, depending on your usage and what you want to do, and some add-ons. We have not talked about add-ons yet, but for example, we would have Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. We would have some Microsoft Defender for endpoints, for identities, so many things that you would have access only if you have the sufficient licenses within your organization. And those licenses, you could assign it to different users or to different groups And if these licenses are assigned to a group, so every time that a new user is added, that user would get automatically that license. But in case that that license has a free place, because without free place to assign to that user, that wouldn't work actually. So as we said, we talked about group-based licensing. We can assign one or more product licenses to a group. It doesn't matter how many licenses we're going to add to a group, and you can add those licenses actually to any security group that you have within your Azure. Administrator would have the access to service plans and all of those. So these are actually, it's much better to have the licenses for groups rather than the users, because it's much easier to actually to manage those licenses after a while. Believe me, you don't want to go through all the users and check their licenses after a while. Now in a labs environment, maybe it wouldn't be important, but in a real situation, yeah, that's like a pain on your head. So we don't want that. Anyway, we have here on the well on the left plate on my Azure Active Directory, I chose licenses. So here I'm going to choose, for example, all products. And here you can see that I have these different licenses in case that you would have, or you are working on your lab environment, or you will work on your lab environment, you would have some options to try and buy. You can try the P2 license from Azure Active Directory for 30 days for free. There are some limitations, but if it's really for a lab, you wouldn't. It doesn't matter. So you can use that 30 days trial to activate it. Just what you need is to activate that, or also you can also activate this E5 um, enterprise mobility and security. That is, I think, it's the most equipped license within Azure. Because with that E5, you would have access to so many add-ons and so many features within Azure, and the combination of P2 and E5 is, if it's not the best, it's one of the best. So that's how you check your licenses. But the moment that you active your P2, you need to go back to your Azure Active Directory, and here in overview, the license would be shown like that. Azure AD Premium P2 would be shown. Before that, it would be shown like a free one. I have upgraded my license long ago, so it's shown here. But if you upgrade your license and you press on trial and you want to try that, it would may take like 5 to 10 minutes sometimes. So don't worry, you just need to refresh the page until it gets the updated Azure AD Premium P2 license. And going back to the licenses, we can actually go to the all products. Let's see. Here you can see that from each license, how many in total I have. Here I have 20 from each of those. I have assigned 18 here, only one E3, and I have available 19. So, for example, let's check here the E5. I have two licenses free, so I can assign to a new user. And here I can choose add a user or groups. We can choose different users, and I'm going to choose Bianca, and then just review and assign, and that person would have that uh, license. Or the another option, as I said, is better to have it to the to actually to a group. So I'm going to write, for example, finance. So I'm going to delete Bianca, and I'm going to assign that to a finance. So review and assign. But look at here, it says 9 out of 9 enabled. So those users which are in that group already have that license assigned. So it doesn't matter if I do it again or not, I would probably get an error. So we are not going to do that. But anyway, that's the way that you're going to assign uh, the licenses to different users. And as we said, it's much, much better to assign it to the groups. Let's go back to our presentation to continue with our presentation. We have talked till now when we created the users and when we created the groups, we talked about the roles, but not actually particularly about the roles. So now we are going to go deeply through that. What is a role actually within Azure Active Directory? A role is a group of permissions. So instead of saying that we're going to give permission to that user or that object, we're going to assign those objects or those users a role. So as I said, a role is a group of permissions. These are the roles that we are going to define within Azure Active Directory. So these are the tenant level roles. These are assigned to the subscriptions, to the domains. So in case that you assign that role, it would be in the tenant level. It's a bit different than Azure roles because we have also Azure roles. We are not going to cover it for now too much, but these are two different stuff. So Azure roles, for example, you can normally assign it also to the resources, to the resource groups, and this stuff. But Azure Active Directory roles, it's in the tenant level, in the level of the Active Directory. So knowing that, let's go through the roles. That what can we do with those roles within Azure? So what is the most important? The features. We can add the multi-factor authentication for those roles. That would help us too much. We will talk tomorrow about that. We can add single sign-on SSO. Single sign-on is when, for example, you just connect yourself within your computer or laptop, and then you would have access to many different organizational applications without logging in again. So only one time you would sign in, and then you would have access to all of those. That's a great option. We want that. So single sign-on is one of the options that we would get it also with the help of the roles and the conditional access here that would be so important for us within Azure Active Directory. So here in the portal, let's check it in the portal. We go back to the Azure Active Directory, and the left blade, we can see the roles and administrators. I click on that, and then I can see the application administrator and different roles. Let's say we want the defender. Or let's just write the billing administrator. Yeah. We're going to assign that to a user. So add assignment. And then I'm going to choose the user, which I want to give the billing administrator role to that user. So I'm going to choose Cameron White, select here, the next, and now we have the assignment type. We have not talked about it yet, but let's go through that. There are two different types of assignments: eligible or active assignments. It's like a PIM access, only the time that the user needs to have access, or the just enough access, just in time, just enough access for those users. So in case that we choose active for that user would have all the time permanently that permission of the billing administrator, and I just need to write a justification, blah, 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 and that's it. The user would have the active and permanent access to be the billing administrator. But if I choose eligible, it wouldn't be for always. So I can just select that, and you can see I can choose from which day assignment starts, on which time of the day, which hour, and it ends on which day. So here, for example, it's one year. So I can change it maybe to um, like 2 days only, from 17 to 19, and from 8:50 to maybe the same time. It doesn't matter. That's the way that the user would have only these 2 days access as the role that we define as the billing administrator, and just be assigned it. So that user would be eligible to have access during that time to our resources. How does it work exactly? We would talk more about it within our team when we, I think on the third day, we're going to talk about it better. But anyway, that's the way actually you're going to assign a role to a user within Azure Active Directory. So going back to our uh, presentation, yeah, uh, these roles that they could have different intentions for IT admins, app developers, Microsoft 365, and so on. There are so many roles there. We can also actually define our custom roles, but so many roles that you may not need the custom roles to define for your own. But anyway, there are possible. You can, for example, also if you check some built-in roles that they don't meet your goals, you can always create your own roles. But don't forget, you need P1 or P2 access, like the license to do the custom roles within Azure. And this is about assigning roles. We already have talked about how to assign a role to a user, and we also checked that it would be like eligible or active for always. We are going to have better control on our resources within Azure when we choose to assign a role just for a specific time as the role is needed. And we can assign the role to subscription or broader scape. Um, the roles we can assign to manage some subscription or management groups or resource groups. It's not that we're going to have it only for a specific user. We can have it on the tenant level, as we said, because we are going to work within Azure Active Directory. And the delegation scenarios, that is what we talked about it actually. To restrict and manage application creation, for example, you are going to give the application developer or application administrator to a user, but you don't want that user to have access to those resources all the time. You want that user maybe only 1 month or 2 months for a special project. So that's actually when you give only special time your user time, so you would have more visibility and more control over your organization. And as you can see here, these are the most important stuff. Least privilege you give to the users just in time, so they would have access only the time that they need, maybe 1 hour per day, 2 hours, not the whole day, and just long enough. These are the terms that are really important when you are going to define a role for a user to have access. So there are, as we said, to delegating an app administration, we can actually delegate the application administrator role or cloud application administrator role. These are different options, or the app registration, or whatever we can define within the built-in roles with Azure. We saw the built-in roles, but let's take a look at it a bit deeper. So here I'm in my Azure Active Directory, and now I'm going on to the left plate to the roles and administrators. And here is where we can see the roles, and also here is the type, which is built in. I don't have any custom roles yet, but now we are going to check it. But anyway, you can check the description also for each role to see if that role meets your goals or not. And when you're going to define your custom role, we are going to define the name, and then what is important here are the permissions. So there are so many things here. I mean, so many stuff here. It may be a bit hard to understand it. For example, let's write here read. And as you can see here, for the application policies, all properties read, application policies owners read, blah, blah. All of these are about the read. And if I say, for example, write, would have so many other options. Uh, Sorry, that was not for here. You can check actually it was create, yeah. When you say create, you would have so many other different options. So if you are not sure what you're going to choose, you can go back here to the roles, and here go to the description. And here you can see the role permissions of each built-in role. So here you would see that predefined role, that built-in role within Azure, which permission has. So knowing those permissions, you can maybe copy paste those and have your own version. So that's how you can actually control your roles and your custom apps. So that's a good way to create your custom roles, because if you only go there, just a new custom role, it would be hard to choose between all those roles, that permissions that are there. And now we can get it better. As we said, a role is a group of permissions, and now you can see that each role has a list of maybe hundreds of groups, hundreds of permissions that are in one group, which is called the role. So that's the way how it works. Let's go back to our presentation. And we also have the administrative units. What are the administrative units actually? It's when we have different branches, when we have different areas, when we have different departments, and we want to divide those and have a group within those groups. It's like something like nesting a group. So you would have administrative unit within your Azure Active Directory. Uh, it group users together and provide administrative permissions for certain users within that group. So, for example, here we have a scenario. We have a large university composed of many autonomous schools, school of business, school of engineering, and so on. Each school has a team of IT admins who control access, manage users, and set policies for their school. Administrative tasks could include uh, these different tasks. So you have your different branches, and you want to have access for IT department within each branch. So you create a group, you create an administrative unit, and that would work like a group within your organization. That's a really good feature, and that's how you can manage your users not to have too much effort for the things that are not necessary for the IT admins in general, and you can make maybe a small group within your branch or whatever, so the users within that branch can do their own stuff without having any problems. So The other thing is the custom domains. As we talked about it, I told you that there is an option to have the custom domain within Azure. When we were creating actually the user, I said we can have the custom domain here. So how it works, let's go back to our Azure portal. I'm going to go back to my portal and my Active Directory. And here on the left plate, going to find the custom domain, if I can see it here. So to add a new custom domain, you just come here, you press add custom domain, and then you are going to write your domain name. You may think, well, I would write google.com or whatever. Let's write it. So then you would need to have these txt or mx records within your configuration of your domain. So what you need to go to the domain name registrar within your domain name. So depends where you bought your domain or where you have your configurations. So you go there and you make new rows with this information. It depends. You want the txt or mx records. So copying those information, then Azure would know your domain as a registered and verified domain. So actually, it would take maybe around like 24 to 48 hours because it takes time that until it doesn't read it from a cache or something. So it would take a bit time. So if you really are going to do that, don't worry, it takes the time, but at the end, it will work. So actually pretty darn cool. That's how you are going to add your custom domain to the Azure, and that's how you, when you are going to create the user, if you recall from the, when I created the user, yeah, here, if you have the verified domain, it would appear here, and then you can choose your domain. So you wouldn't use the onmicrosoft.com, you would use your custom domain, have access to the Azure resources. And that's the way actually it works. Now let's check how to configure tenant-wide settings. There are different configurations that we can assign. We can assign different types of configurations, some defaults to the users, some defaults for the Azure Active Directory. Later, also I will show you how to manage the security defaults when you want to go in, when you want to have the default one. So there are different ways to actually manage your organization within these settings, the tenant-wide settings. One of them is the user settings that we're going to check it now in the portal also. You would have different options that are you going to give access to the users to register apps and the to administration portal, the LinkedIn account connections, whatever. We can define it here, and it would help you also for the external users within the user settings. Also, you can choose for the external user which permissions would they have to actually to share information or to send information or whatever with the others. You may want to restrict the guest users as much as you can because that would be a bit dangerous if you have so many guest users and they're going to connect themselves to your organization, and then you would have some data breach or something like that. So it's better not to give too much power to your external collaboration of your organization. And we also have some tenant properties. Here we can define the name of the tenant and other options. Let's go and check it in the portal. So here. I'm going to go back to my Azure Active Directory. On the left blade, we are going to go to the user settings, and here we have different options. User can register applications, yes or no. Administration portal, it depends on the configurations that you would like to have. And here down here, you see we have the external collaboration settings. That's what we wanted to check because that is one of the most important. So we have the guest user access. The guest users have the same access as members. No, we don't want that. Guest users have limited access to properties and memberships of directory objects, and guest user access is restricted to properties and memberships of their own directory objects. I read that. So for example, for that option, I would say the most restrictive because I don't want my guest users to have access to the things that they shouldn't. So I'm going to choose that. So that's the way you are going to define your policy, and that's the way how you can govern your external users or in general your users within Azure. So I find it pretty damn cool. So it's really good option to have control on your organization users and the external users. And also we have here the properties. We saw it. We can change the name, but be careful. We can just change the name, so this name would be changed just to see that. The address, if you recall, the address wasn't Contoso. It was something W35 something like that. It's here, WWLX whatever. So the name wouldn't change the domain. There's no way to change the domain name. So in case that you don't like it, the only way is to create a new one. This name that you would change is only for the name that is shown here. And also some other thing, what is so important, manage security defaults. We are going to choose enable security defaults when we are not experts, when we don't want to pay to have some special conditional access, some special multi-factor authentication. So in this case, maybe we are going to have some security defaults here. So in case that you're not going to have any conditional access, so let's say yes, but in case that you know that you're going to define your conditional access and your MFA and all of this stuff, so it's better to have the security defaults disabled, and you will define your own conditional access by your own. Tomorrow we'll talk about the conditional access, not for today, but just for so you know, in the tenant-wide settings, also we can define the manage security defaults. In your exam, that also there may be a question from that. So whenever you enable manage security defaults, it means that you don't have experience, you are not professional, you only have the basic information, that's where you're going to enable. And when it's disabled, it means that you're a professional, you're an IT expert, and you're not going to just enable the defaults. You're going to enable and define your own conditional access and MFA rules. Just to know that for now. Tomorrow we'll talk about it like deeper, but for now that was everything about the tenant-wide configuration. So let's go back to our presentation. We are going to talk about the external identities and guest users. These actually are almost the same like the users. If you recall, when we created a new user, we had also the option to create a guest user. We're going to create that guest user for now, and we are going to check it if we can invite that user, so that user would connect itself to our Azure Active Directory. Well, before that, it's important to know the different types of the external collaboration. We have two types. We have B2B, business to business, or we have B2C, business to customer. So in both cases, the users are going to use their own identity. For example, here, as you can see, we have the user that could use their social media or whatever to authenticate, and that's the way that they would have access to the organization. So these are external users. These are not normal users within our organization. So this external user can connect with their information to the organization. But why do we call it B2B? And in the exam, how do we know what is the difference between B2B and B2C? Well, the answer is when we talk about B2B collaboration, we're talking about internal collaboration. Like the external user want to come to your internal collaboration and want to collaborate with you. And when we talk about B2C, which is not the diagram here, we're going to talk about the external user wants to have access to your internal web or mobile app service. So that's different. For example, the Gmail, Facebook, whatever. So that's the point, and that's the difference between the B2B and B2C configuration of your organization. And as you can see here, for example, it works like that the company A, which has the Active Directory, would send an invitation to the user. So the user would be able to connect and maybe have their multi-factor authentication and then connect to the cloud apps and on-premises network. So that's actually how it works. Later, we're going to create a guest user and try it out. And that's how it looks like for a user as a guest, that it's defined the user type guest, and then it's homed in the organization directory. Here the cloud only accounts or on-prem accounts, and this diagram would give you actually better view of the B2B model and how would be the collaboration of the B2B model. So in case that we're going to collaborate with external users, as we said, we're going to invite those users as guests to our tenant. Then we're going to have the external users and use their existing credentials for authentication. These are assigned, and they are assigned permissions for authorization, and we can restrict what external users can see and do. Let's go and take a look at our portal and try to create a user, external user this time. So I go to my Azure Active Directory on the left blade users, and then I'm going to click on new user. And here I'm going to click on invite external user. And as you can see here, it's chosen by default because before I said that I want to invite the user. So actually, I have created a user before with an app with an Hotmail account. So the name I'm going to write maybe my name, and the email address would be armin300 at hotmail.com. So as you see, that user is not on Microsoft.com, is another user which is actually external user. So it's different. And the first name and the last name, we are not going to fill that. We're just going to leave it. As you can see, we can choose the roles and groups. For example, if we would have a group for guest users, we could, with the predefined roles, that would be helpful, and that would be so fast to do it. So anyway, we're going to invite that user. So successfully invited the user. Let me open a new incognito window, and I'm going to write hotmail.com, sign in. Armin, let's see, 300. And I have a password here. No. Yeah, let's take a look at here. It was just sent now, and that's the way it looks. That Microsoft Invitations on behalf of Contoso, that's the name of my organization as you saw it on my portal. So that's the way that the user, the guest user, actually receives the sender mod administrator, which is my user by my portal, and with that invitation can accept the invitation and then go through the portal and do all the things which are needed to contact. And here is the permission requested by Cantoso. It's the consent that we're going just to accept to reach the information. And let's see, it's working. We would have to have some access to the apps. Yeah, and as you can see, we are in the page of my applications here, or we may go to the portal, for example, with the information of that user, whatever. I'm not going to lose more time here, but anyway, you saw how it looks like in the email of the user. So the user would get the information like that somebody invited you and needs to accept it to have all the access to that organization. And then when we go to the users, to all users, and let's click on user type. It's not updated yet. Let me go back here. Here it is. Now we have the guest user. You saw that all of our users are member, but this one that we just added is a guest user, and it's actually written here, and the identity is by Microsoft account because it's not through our Microsoft Azure Active Directory. It's through the Hotmail directly, and it's the creation type is through an invitation, and that's actually how it works with the guest users within Azure. Let's go back to our presentation. Yeah, we can also invite the external users, also like the normal users with bulk information. As I said, it's a CSV file we can download, and if you recall at the beginning of the course, we did it something similar with the normal users. It would be pretty much the same with the external user. Maybe some information would be changed. But anyway, it's pretty the same information. So you would have, when you want to invite hundreds, thousands of guest users at once to your organization, so you can use that bulk option. So you won't go through the portal every time. So that was it. And let's also take a look at how to manage external user accounts in Azure Active Directory. These are actually some features that are almost the same, or actually the same, like the normal users. You can assign roles, the group membership, the licenses. We talked about all of those during this course today. We can assign those also to the resource, to the guest users. About the roles, we said we can define different role for each user, and so the user would have their role so we could control the user much better before they start having total access to our organization. And actually, the user states of B2B connection, it would look something like that. It's the difference between the member that we saw it in the portal, that is a normal user, and between that and the guest that we saw whenever we invite the user, it's actually shown as a guest user. And also it was written that the invitation type was by an email sent to that user. Here is about the dynamic groups. We have also talked about the dynamic groups at the beginning of this course. Now we need to take a look at some different uh, choices of setup for some hybrid identities. Till now, we have talked about the identities within Azure, within the cloud. We have talked about the identities also from the guest users that they would have their authentication through another identity provider. But now we're going to talk about the hybrid identities. What does it mean, hybrid identities? It means that we have our own on-prem network, and also we have our Azure Active Directory. And how does it work? There are three different ways. The first one that we're going to talk about it is the password hash sync. And how does that work? The user wants to connect itself. So the user would connect itself directly to the Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory, from where does it have the information of the users? From the on-prem Active Directory, which is connected through Azure AD Connect to our Azure AD. So this information from the Active Directory that we have is directly to the Azure Active Directory, and this information is hashed. So the passwords are going to be saved in our Azure Active Directory, but in type of hash. And that's the way that we could have a copy of the passwords, but within our Azure Active Directory. So whenever a user wants to log in, wants to sign in, so they don't need to go through the whole process and then come back. So they only can go through directly to our Azure Active Directory, because our Azure Active Directory is synced with our Active Directory, on-premise Active Directory. So that's the way how actually it works. That is actually the recommended option by Microsoft. So the password hashing, if you don't have any complicated or complex authentication types or something really important in your organization, like extra security, like some government information and bank accounts and this stuff, maybe you would need to think about another option, maybe about the federated services or password authentication. But that is the first option, the password hash sync. The second one would be the pass-through authentication. That is the other way of authentication that we can do it by the configuration, some different configuration within our Azure Active Directory and our on-prem Active Directory. So this time, it wouldn't be like using the hash for the passwords. It would be like that the user, when it wants to connect, well, it would connect itself directly to the cloud, to the Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory at the same time has the connection in two ways, to and from the on-prem Active Directory. And that's how, when the user wants to connect, Azure Active Directory asks the normal Active Directory, hey, I have that user. It says he has that credentials. Do you recognize him? And if the Active Directory says yes, then Azure Active Directory also would accept that user. But if not, it would block that user automatically from signing in to the Azure Active Directory. That's the way, actually. For example, you can also check logon hours between the user and the Azure Active Directory. That's what you can check. If in case that you ask why do we need all that process, the logon hours is one of the most important stuff. And also for redundancy, you always need minimum two servers, because in case that one server is down, the other one could communicate between Azure Active Directory and the Active Directory domain services. So that's the way that pass-through authentication would work, and that's a much better way to have more security information. It's a bit more, it's not more complicated, because the point here is if you don't have two servers which are redundant, if one is down and if you only have one, you would have problems, because that moment the passwords are not synced from Azure Active Directory, and they cannot actually send information between those. So that would be a problem. So it's not that recommended, but in case that you really think that you need that pass-through authentication, then that's the choice for you to do it. All of this configuration about the password hash synchronization or this pass-through authentication or within the Azure Active Directory Connect, Azure AD Connect. So here is where you can actually define which type of federation, which type of authentication you are going to use for your hybrid identities. And as you can see here, we have five options. The last one is do not configure, which I don't think that you would choose. So we would have four other options. The first one and the second one, we talked about those. But how about the federation with ADFS and federation with ping federate? These are some advanced features. These are not covered by this course, but anyway, I would just comment it really fast so you would have more information about it. Uh, it's when you have different various servers and you want to connect those servers through a federation to your user. So what you do, you generate a certificate, and with that certificate, you are going to use your password hash synchronization and to connect yourself to the Azure AD. So that's actually the way the federation works. So you have your different various servers, and you would get a certification from those, and through PHS, password hash synchronization, you are going to have the information to Azure Active Directory. That's the federation authentication. That also could be through a smart card, like a third-party authentication. It's much more complicated, but in case that you really need uh, that type of configuration, that's actually how it works. In case that one day you are going to work with that AD Connect and you see those other two options, so you know what they do actually. What other thing which is really important by configuring Azure, and what we want from that is single sign-on. What does it mean? It means that whenever you connect yourself to your cloud and you're going to have connection from your Active Directory, and you are going to open different applications, different stuff. And you know that these days we all have many different accounts. We don't want to like just memorize the passwords. It would be so hard to memorize password for each different place. So in case that logging every time for different application, Azure Active Directory will do that for you. That's SSO, single sign-on. So the users will connect themselves only one time at the beginning when they connect themselves to the Azure Active Directory. And after that, the Azure Active Directory with that token will connect that user every time that user wants to have access to different applications. Now you would say, well, but if that user want to, if we don't want that user to have access to different, to all the applications, we want to have administrator to have access to different applications rather than like helpless users. How do we do that? With the roles, with the permissions, with the group of permissions, which are called roles. We're going to define for each user which permissions they have, sorry, so they can choose their way to have their SSO and connect to the applications much faster in that way. So let me just show that also here. It's actually explained how the seamless SSO is set up. So it's enabled using Azure AD Connect. When you are going to define, when you are defining the settings within your AD Connect, you can also define that about the SSO. And as you can see here, a computer account is created on your on-prem Active Directory in each AD forest that you synchronize to Azure AD using Azure AD Connect. And these are different options that from KROS and different keys, the decryption key that you would need. We're not going to go through the SSO. We will also have SSO for the applications that we will check on the third day on this course. So if you recall, we said that we are going to have 5 days, and each day we are going to talk about different topic, different module. So this is actually, let me make it bigger so you can check it much better. This is what we learned today. Today we talked about how to configure and manage Azure Active Directory users, implement initial configuration of Azure Active Directory, create, configure, and manage identities like the users and groups, and implement and manage external identities that we just created an external identity and we tried it. So we said we are going to have like 2 hours the course. After that, you would have like half an hour to take a break, and as you can see, you would have different labs. So after the break, it's you're supposed to do these labs, and if you have any questions, we are here. My colleague David and I, we are here to answer your questions. And also, there is a homework for you, for example, to add a federated identity provider, and explore dynamic groups. These are the things, for example, if you would have more time, you could do it also through the lecture lab if you have time during these 2 hours and a half. So practically, that was everything that we had to learn today about the principles and the first module of Azure. We are going to take a look again at our portal. So we are going to check again the configurations that we did today. So let's go to the home, and I'm going to search for the Azure Active Directory. I click on that. So here today we chose, for example, the users, and we said here we can create the new user and create the guest user. And we talked also about the deleted users, which we could have those restored or to delete those permanently. Something that is also really important for your exam, the users are stored here maximum 30 days. So to know that, not more than that. The users could be here. And what is here? User settings. Do you remember before we went through the user settings from the main blade? We were in our Azure Active Directory, but now we are in the user section. So from here also you can uh, access the user settings, and here we can define again which users can access what, and also manage external collaboration settings that we went through that. We have the groups that we talked about it, different groups and different types that we can create. We said we have the Microsoft 365 and the security. The security is for the users that we're going to create for to use all the things that we need within our Azure Active Directory, and the Microsoft 365 is for the users that are only for the Exchange or some Microsoft 365 applications usage. So we are not going to do that. We have the membership type that we said. We have the assigned and the dynamic. And when we choose, for example, dynamic, we are going to add dynamic query. So that's the way actually we are going to define which configuration we are going to have. And don't forget, for dynamic user and dynamic group and dynamic device, you would need P1 or P2 licenses. That also one of the questions that common you would maybe confront it in the exam. And after that, well, also in the users, you would have that option, bulk operation results. So whenever you are going to upload a bulk file, a CSV file to your bulk operation to have so many users at once, here you can see if it was succeeded or not, and if not, what was the problem, and that's the way actually also you can troubleshoot that. And we talked about that. Let's go to the external collaboration settings, the external identities. We went through that from the other sections, but from here, from the external identities, also we can access that information. If you remember, we went through user settings and then we had access here, but anyway, we can access that also from here, from the external collaboration settings. And as I said, I don't like to have the configuration like that. I would prefer the most restrictive for my external collaboration settings, because I don't want to give them too much access. But anyway, it depends on the politics and the policy of the organization where you work. Then we also talked about the administrative units and roles and administrators. So we said about the roles and administrators. The roles are a group of permissions, and we said we can choose between different roles, and then also copy maybe some permissions and make our new custom role. These custom roles are also P1 or P2. They require P1 or P2 licenses. Let's go back. We have our administrative units. We talked about it, but we didn't create actually. So we said when we have different organizations with different branches within our organization, we are going to have better an administrative unit. For example, let's say, for example, New York branch, and assign roles. So we can, for example, authentication administrator, then we can define who and which members we're going to have. So we're going to create, and actually it's created. And with that administrative unit, I can have more access. I can grant more access to the users within that group to organize their own problems when they have some things to do when they want to give access, when somebody's sick there, maybe they didn't come to work and they need to do the job of other person. And simply here, adding a new member, you can add different users, and uh, like that, we have 5 users. And actually, you see that I also added my guest user type, so it accept that. And then you can also come to the roles and administrators, and you can choose different role, and from the built-in roles that are here for the users within the same administrative unit. Those users who have access, like for example, a user administrator within that administrative unit, it doesn't mean that they have the same access through the whole tenant. They only have access of that role within their own administrative unit. So that's everything, the whole usage of administrative units. So we talked about these 5, and then we also talked about devices. We said there are 3 different types of registration for the devices. We said there are registered, bring your own device when it's personal. We have the joint one, the cloud only one, the organizational, um, which is not your own, and the AD joint, which is on-prem, replicate hash and devices. That is, those are the 3 ways of the device registration. And here, as I said, you can see it, but in a real organization, I don't have any devices here registered, neither joined. And also, we talked about the Azure AD Connect, but we are not going to configure Azure AD Connect in this course. But anyway, all the configuration that you saw about the password hash synchronization, pass-through authentication, or Active Directory federated services are through the Azure AD Connect. You saw some screenshots that you could choose, and so whenever you need to do that with your on-prem network, when you need some setup for your hybrid identities or hybrid network, you always need to connect your Active Directory to your Azure Active Directory through Azure AD Connect. We also talked about the licenses. We said about the different licenses and how to activate those licenses through the all products, and you would have better view of which users are assigned those licenses. And we also talked about the custom domain names, that you can change the domain name of your organization and choose the verified one, but you need to add these records, which are TXT or MX records, to your organization. That would be also a question in your exam, which type of records you can add to your domain name registrar for your custom domain name. So don't forget, the types are TXT and MX. And the other option here, the user settings, that we saw it from other side also. And the properties that we said we can define here, the manage security defaults, which we can enable it if we don't have any information about the multi-factor authentication or conditional access. But if we are going to define our own conditional access, we are going to leave it like no, disabled. And then tomorrow, when we are going to go to talk about the multi-factor authentication and conditional access, you will see here in the security that we're going to have a bit fun doing that tomorrow, because it's a really important section. As you can see, I'm going to show to you what we're going to go to do tomorrow. We're going to check during the course, plan and implement multi-factor authentication, implement access management for Azure resources, secure Azure AD user with MFA, and manage user authentication. These are the things that we're going to do, and you would have some labs. Unfortunately, the section for the conditional access and identity protection are not included on the lecture. That's your homework. But I think we would have some like some minutes extra tomorrow to talk also about a bit about conditional access. So in case that you're going to check it at home and read it, you get a bit more familiar before starting to learn about it. And this is the second day, and the rest days that we have different plans for each day, but every day would be like that. You would have 2 hours from different sections, and then you would have half an hour the break time, and then you would start your labs. That was pretty much for today. Uh, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and have this course with me. That was a pleasure for me, and I hope that you would enjoy your afternoon doing the labs. And please let us know if you have any questions, if you are not familiar with something, if you don't know how to do the labs or whatever. In the next section, we would have the chat, the Q&A session. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask us. Thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.